Now let's proceed and work on the latest work section. Now switch on to the design and notice what we have here. On the latest work, this heading right here is obviously wrapped in a container since this is centered on the page. And below it, this list of images is 100% width. What this means is this is not included on the wrapping container. This will vary on to the width of the web browser, and it will be measured by percentage, which is for these 4 images right here will be measured 25% of width. Now take note about that, and let's switch on to our text editor and let's start working on first on the heading part. So since the heading is on the container, let's create a div with a class of heading. Since this heading will be used mostly of the sections, so we're going to create a class for it and make sure to comment it out. Now let's divide the heading into 2 columns. Again, I'm going to use call_md since the purpose of this website is when it reaches below the smallest desktop size, everything will be centered. So divide it MD6 for 2 column. Latest work heading and followed by the button, which is the view all button. So as you can see, we have latest work and view all. Let's wrap the latest work into an h1 tag. Now, as I mentioned, when I'm going to resize this and it will reach the smallest desktop size, which is for the tablet, everything will be uncentered. So I'm going to add a class for this heading, text center. Now let's proceed on the gallery part. Make sure you comment it out and heading, and just right below this, let's create a div with a class of gallery. Make sure you comment it out, as well as for this latest work. Now inside the gallery, let's create another div. Name it Gallery Inner. Comment it out. And this gallery inner will serve as the wrapper of each images. So let's create an image. And the source for this one will be image gallery and the name. And Bootstrap has a special class for responsive images by just adding a class of image responsive. Now hit on refresh. So this is the full width of the image. And notice if I'm going to resize this one, on refresh, alt, image class, image responsive, image gallery responsive. I misspelled the responsive. So as you can see, the image now is responsive. And notice that we will have a hover state, and that hover will have a title, a date, and these controls right here, the buttons. Now inside of this gallery inner, just below the image, let's create another div with a class of caption. And this caption will have another div inside it, will be div with a class caption heading for the title and the date. And let's wrap the title into an h4 tag. And the date to a small tag. And lastly, for the controls. Now we can simply do that by going to button groups, and you can see we need to have this one. Just copy this. Also, we're going to have a class for it, another class, button trigger. We will be using this later on to position these buttons using CSS, but for now let's add the button trigger there. And this requires this one to make this work. So ahref class of button and button default, and let's name this button web link for the first one, and the other is more info. Now let's preview this. Now we have this, the title, the date, and as well as the controls. Note that this caption div will be hidden by default, but when hover on the image, this div will show up, and I think that will be for the gallery or the latest work section for now, since if we're going to copy this and duplicate it 8 times, our code now will be too long. But since we're working on the HTML first, let's leave it that way, and later on we're going to copy everything to have 8 list of images. So just stick with it, and on the next section let's work on the creative process.